So, welcome everyone. This is our next Cyber Talk series at Swiss Cyber Institute. My name is Samir Aliyev. I'm your host today, and I have a very valuable guest today here for you. I'm going to introduce you before I'm going to talk about a little bit house rules. This is a live session, and we are going to share some very useful information with you. In the same time, we are going to record the session that we will share it with the attendees who cannot participate right now, register and cannot participate. If you have any question to ask our speakers, please use Q&A button on the bottom of your windows, and we will be very happy to answer all of your questions at the end of the event. Please do not hesitate to contact us anytime during the webinar. I will just record your questions and I'll ask to our very valuable speaker, who is Walter Buehner. Walter Buehner is a team lead of Cyber Defense Operations Center of Deutsche Gesellschaft für Cybersicherheit. The other name is DGC, and he is a long-time non-profit security researcher. Today, Walter is going to introduce you to the darkness, which is mysterious place for many of us, especially for me as well. And we are going to see what's going on there, which kind of access there are, or which kind of illegal processes are there. I mean, what we can see from the legal side of the world. And this webinar is a quench that thirsts for information and give interest people a somewhat deep look into the dark net. Walter, I believe I did enough introduction for you, and I would like to leave the stage to you. We have a live attendees right now. It's a great, everyone is so excited about your webinar, your presentations, whatever you are going to show us. It will be very exciting.
All right.
Stage is yours.
All right, let me just share my presentation. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, we see it.
Perfect. Okay, so yeah, welcome to the deep and dark web training that I give today. Let me just let you go through the agenda. First, I will give you a little introduction of who I am. I will explain what the difference is between the clear web, the deep web, and the dark web. I give you a short, brief introduction what the deep web is, what the deep web means in an IT security context, which I work every day. I give you an introduction to the dark web. I will briefly introduce you to the onion services, which are the vital part of the dark web. I will further explain what the security implications are from the dark web and what the dark web means in a IT security context. And I give you some examples from the darknet. Usually I tend to have a live session for the darknet here, but due to issues with the Tor network recently, I will show some screenshots and explain sort of, okay, what places can you expect in the dark web? Short introduction to me. That's me. My name is Walter Buehner. I am 32 years old. I resident in Baden-Württemberg, Germany, and I'm currently the team lead for the Cyber Defense Operations Center of the Deutsche Gesellschaft für Cybersicherheit. I oversee the internal security of our company as well the security services that we offer our customers in the blue sector, which include incident response, darknet research, and vulnerability management, basically. What is the difference between the clear web, the deep web, and the dark web? When you first get introduced to these three, you have often a hard time to really say, okay, what is part of one of these webs, right? So classically, we have distinction between these three webs when we talk about the internet as a whole. We have the clear web, or also called surface web. We have the deep web, and we have the dark web. The clear web basically consists of all publicly accessible websites and search engines. So when we talk about the clear web, we talk about sites like Google, Facebook, corporate sites, Instagram, and all this, websites that usually people use every day. The clear web is the most commonly used contact point for people when they interact with the internet. For example, when they look up a company, when they look up a specific service, or when they want to find some specific information. Usually the people use the clear web to get this information that they are looking for. One step below the clear web is the deep web, and the deep web consists of all websites and services that are still accessible via a normal browser, but contain information that is not intended for all people and is maybe confidential or should only be accessible by a handful of people with access privileges. This includes legal and medical documents, for example, databases, subscription informations, everything like that. And as part of the deep web, we have the dark web, which is also a part where we can find information that is maybe not intended for all people, but usually the dark web is only accessible via a special browser or with a dedicated connection. There are browsers like Brave, for example, that offer the opportunity to access specific onion sites via the normal Tor browser, via the normal Brave browser, but usually people use the Tor browser to access the dark web. There are specific distributions that people use to access the dark web. The most popular ones are, for example, Unix and Tails, for example. And a large part of the dark web deals with illegal topics. Keep in mind, what we understand as legal and illegal may not be the same understanding other countries and other people have when it comes to legal and illegal. What do I mean by that? I will show you in a bit. First, I want to give you a brief overview graphically. When we talk about the different kind of webs, the surface web is around 5% of the web when we look at the internet as a whole, and contains search engines, sites like Wikipedia, social medias, online shops, etc. Then we have the deep web, which is roughly 95% of the whole internet, which, as I said, contains financial data, government documents, medical informations, everything like that. And then we have the 1% in the deep web, which is actually the dark web, which contains onion sites, illegal trading sites, organizing protests, and everything like that. And these percentages are roughly. There are different studies who say, okay, the dark web is like 1 to 3% usually. And deep and surface web are 95 and 5%. This is usually on all studies the same. So when we talk about these three webs, we usually use the iceberg model to so people can understand the amount of websites that each of these webs contain, right? First, step back to the deep web. When we talk about the deep web, what are these IT security implications that the deep web has, especially when we look at it as a blue team defender, which is part of my everyday doing. So the deep web is one of the most relevant targets for attackers, since, as I said, it contains valuable information. And deep web protection means information protection, basically. cyber attacks are constantly on the rise. I think everyone in this call is aware of that situation, especially during the recent Russian and Ukraine war. We have noticed an increase on attacks on various kinds of companies and various websites dealing with, for example, informations about the war. And exploits become more sophisticated. When ransomware first got introduced to the world a few years back, it was basically, okay, you have the ransomware, it encrypts your systems, but usually your external systems like your backup systems, phone systems, etc., they were pretty safe. Just your computers and servers had an issue. Today, we look at ransomwares that not only can encrypt backup systems like tape drives and NAS systems, but also encrypt IoT devices like phones, like cameras, like routers and everything like that. And one of the newest trends, or relatively new, is double extortion ransomware, which basically first uploads the data to the dark web and then encrypts the data. So the user or the victim doesn't only have to pay the ransom to get his system encrypted, but also has to pay the ransom to not get his data leaked on the internet. So the deep web, as I said, contains valuable information. Oops. And usually this valuable information is what needs to be protected. Trade secrets, internal data, customer data, everything like that. But today is mostly about the dark web. And as I said, the dark web is the smallest part of the internet. The darknet is accessible via a dedicated browser, or more specifically, a dedicated connection. The darknet offers a lot of legal, but also illegal content. As I said before, what one sees as illegal and illegal may change depending on what country they live in and what part of society they are. So, for example, when we talk about illegal stuff, we have, of course, drug markets, right? We have the purchase of weapons, ammunition, and explosives, or purchase of data. When we talk about legal stuff, it becomes really interesting. Protest websites, we deem them as usually legal, freedom of speech, right? But if I would ask a citizen, or if I would ask a citizen of China or a citizen of Taiwan, they would ask, or they would answer this question differently when I ask them, is a protest website illegal? According to the Chinese government, for example, it's not, right? So that's what I meant earlier when I said it always comes down to the definition of legal versus illegal when we talk about contents on the dark web. Targeted organization of resistance, for example, a huge topic in China and Taiwan, but also recently in the Iran, for example. We deem these organization of resistance as somewhat legal, right? But they are illegal in the specific countries, right? And of course, whistleblower websites. Whistleblowers are the main source of information that gets leaked. Excuse me. Most recently, the whistleblower for the American documents that got leaked online from the Pentagon, which was airman from Texas, as we all know by today, and was a whistleblower basically in regards to the Russian and Ukrainian war, right? The dark web, when we talk about dark web, we talk about onion services. The onion services are basically roughly comparable to web pages or web services of the ClearNet, roughly. But what makes onion services different from the Surface web services? Here it gets a bit more technical, but I promise I go not too deep into the technical stuff. Basically, first of all, onion services are usually not indexed by the big search engines like Google, Bing, DuckDuckGo, etc. like that. The usual clear web search engines do not index onion services. Another difference is that onion services rely on a so-called self-certifying domain name. These self-certifying domain names are usually very hard or almost impossible to remember for a human based on how they look. And this comes down to the fact that the onion services don't rely on the traditional TCP/IP protocol, which is basically the bread and butter when we talk about web services as of today. They instead rely on a combination of private IP or private IP addresses and end-to-end authentication with a specific layer between them. So when we talk about onion services, we have always an end-to-end encryption or authentication in that matter. We have a missing DNS and TCP/IP layer, which means man-in-the-middle attacks are almost impossible. It was for the longest time believed that the onion services are not man-in-the-middle, or the onion services are not susceptible to man-in-the-middle attacks. This was common knowledge for quite a number of years, but there have recently in the last 2 to 3 years, there have been work groups, for example, from Israel and other countries that have proven that under specific circumstances and with specific tools and specific knowledge, you are able to basically perform a man-in-the-middle attack on the onion protocol or on the onion service. And the big advantage of the onion service, when we look at it from an IT standpoint, is that it can't be blocked by a conventional firewall, since there's only an outgoing connection, but never a return connection. This is achieved with so-called nut punching, which basically ensures that the service can always be reached, no matter if there's a firewall in front. Of course, you can block the onion address, and you can you have other means to block the traffic. But speaking on a broader band, a firewall is usually, when it comes down to port filtering, for example, useless against onion services, since you would basically have to block all HTTP and HTTPS traffic, which is maybe not the smartest thing to do. Yeah, so this is basically the boring technical part of the presentation about the deep and dark web, and I come to examples from the darknet, since a lot of people, especially from movies and from books and games and everything like that, have a very wrong understanding what the darknet is and what you can find on the darknet. So one of the first examples, or one of the first sites you will use in the dark web, are so-called directory sites. Directory sites are usually look like that. This directory site specifically is called Undertale, and you can think of it of kind of like an address book for the dark web. Not so much as a telephone book, since the links that you find here in this address book are user supplied. They are verified by the owner of the service, of course, but they are user submitted. So it's more of like an address book where a user gives specific information. What kind of service do you offer? What is your onion address? And as you can see here, usually it's differentiated between specific topics. So we have the core sites like introduction points, search engines, and others. We have technology, we have social sites, we have politics and religion, where we find activism, for example, or where we find politics or religion or whistleblowing or anything like that, right? And so these are usually the first introduction points that someone has to the dark web when he's pretty new and just wants to get a general idea what services a darknet has to offer. As I said, activism and freedom of speech is another huge part of the dark web. And when we look for that, there are specific examples for that. I, for example, today use an example, RiseUp. RiseUp is a community. They describe themselves as a community for liberatory social change. It's basically a very left-oriented activism group, which offers email services, updates, mailing lists for specific social issues that have to do with various kinds of, let's say, social problems that we encounter today, like climate change, like inequality, like human rights violations, for example, when we talk about the Ukrainian and Russian war that I mentioned earlier. And there are many sites like RiseUp, which are a hub for like-minded people to share thoughts, to discuss various topics, and just to talk about topics. What leads someone to a site like RiseUp? We in Germany, we can talk about this stuff relatively open. On Facebook, on Twitter, on other social media platforms, you can talk about social issues, about things like that, relatively open. But when you live in the aforementioned states like China, like Taiwan, like Iran, you don't have this privilege. And these people need another platform to have these kind of conversations. And that's where these activism and freedom of speech sites come in. And they are usually in the dark web, since, as I said, the onion services offer a high level of anonymity and are very hard to detect or block, basically, or block in general, right? But the dark web, of course, is not only stuff like that. It's also, for example, drug markets. This is a relatively known market called Nemesis, where interested people can buy various kinds of products. For example, drugs, mobile phones, hacking materials, etc., like that. Various topics. But of course, you cannot only buy stuff, you can also discuss stuff, which is not tied to activism and freedom of speech, but more like a discussion base. One of the most known places for that is the Reddit of the dark web, also known as Dread. Dread is basically, if you ever use Reddit, you will see where Dread got the inspiration from. And it's basically a discussion forum, all things related to the dark web. It used to for discussions about various kind of topics. You can find everything from drugs to offenses and everything like that on there. And when we talk about markets, there are open markets. So you go there, you can register yourself, and you have access to the market. We talk about semi-public places where you have to be invited to, or where you have to pay to get access to. And we talk about the private section. And private markets are usually on a Private sections are usually accessed on a trust basis. So you have to get the trust of the website owners or of the people who can give you access, or have to be invited by a member of the website to get access, right? So another example for a market is Cypher. Cypher is a market where you also can buy various kinds of stuff, as you can see here in the picture, drugs and, for example, credit cards, right? But various other stuff that you can buy in these markets. As I said, initially, from guns to explosives to chemicals to fake passports, you can buy a lot of things in these markets, right? And they all have their own designs, but usually they can look like this. As I said, this is one of the more known markets called Cypher, where you can buy this stuff. Cypher, you have to register an account for, then you basically can buy your stuff and get it delivered to yourself. How can I trust a vendor? This is always a topic in the dark web, since when we buy usually on the clear web, we rely on brand recognition, or we rely on user ratings. For example, when we buy on eBay, right? People tend to look at the ratings of the seller from eBay, right? So how do we do it in the dark web? In the dark web, there is different kinds of vendor ratings. Today, I show a basic version of this vendor rating here. This site is called Darknet Trust, for example, and they have currently 26,000 profiles listed, 38 markets, and 32 PGP keys. And basically, you look for the PGP fingerprint or the username of a user, and you can see if what rating they have, if they are verified, if they are trusted, if they have a trust score. Of course, this is very public, so always be vigilant when you look on the trust of someone in more public places like that, right? But when you are in the dark web, you get a feeling for the trustworthiness of someone else, right? But one of the key rules of the darknet is never assume that the person you are talking to is the person they say they are. Another big part of the dark web is, for example, the data leaks, right? So this is where I get a lot of information for my customers. And when they talk about, hey, do I have leaked data on the market? Does someone sell my data on the black market, right? And there was a very known site where you can get data, which was called Raid Forum. They got busted by the FBI a few years back, and the successor breach got busted a few weeks ago. They were hubs where you could basically find a lot of stolen data. And another one is, for example, Clop leaks. Clop is a ransomware gang, basically, or not a ransomware gang, an ATP gang, right? A threat actor. And they have, for example, different kind of data available to download, right? So we have there, for example, for Virgin, we have for them data to download, or for Hormel Foods, for example, right? And they offer various kinds of data to be purchased and or to be gathered from their server, right? But another big group that likes to share data with the community is ransomware gangs. There are dedicated sites for ransomware gangs. I hope you can see it. Sorry if it's a bit small. But there are, for example, tracking sites that keep track where ransomware gangs put their data up for grabs. For example, we have here big names like Blackbuster, for example, or Conti, back when they were a thing, or other various groups, basically, where they put their stuff, and you can follow the links and take a look, take a peek, what they offer on their websites and what they offer to download. We recently had a customer who got breached by one of these groups, and we worked with the customer and the law enforcement in Germany to basically see, okay, what data they have, what data will they publish, money transfer and everything like that, right? And they had all of its data, which was around 4 petabytes of data, all basically available in the darknet to download. So you can find very good intel on these sites when you look for customers, when you want to look for yourself. Hey, I may have someone who stole data. Is it available here, right? And there are dedicated companies who scan the darknet and basically offer services to notify you when someone sells your data on the darknet, right? And one of the last parts I want to mention are whistleblower websites. Whistleblower websites, as I initially said, are a vital part as well of the darknet. Edward Snowden, I'm sure everyone knows him, used one. We had other whistleblowers in the past who used them, and whistleblower website can look like that. This is the whistleblower website from The Guardian. You can submit your whistleblowing data, you can give yourself a code name, and then the data goes straight to The Guardian and you can blow the whistle. You can also log in and check. One second. You can also log in and check on your submission what the submission status is, for example, right? When we talk about dark web, we also should mention chat rooms. Chat rooms, classical IRCs, but also other chat rooms are a part of the darknet. A chat room can look like this, for example, where you have various chat messages where basically the users talk to each other. I deliberately censored the usernames of the users just for privacy reasons. But yeah, this is a normal darknet chat, which occurred this morning when I took the screenshot to have a nice new one. And as you see, various kinds of topics are discussed in this chat. They are usually tend to be kind of random. And as I said, one of the last parts, activism. I briefly mentioned it earlier, but there are a lot of activism sites in the dark web. This is only a snapshot of these activism sites. Like we see alone for the creative community, we have 2,555 onion sites, right? For human rights, we have almost 1,000. We have over 1,000 for anarchists and socialists, for example. So you can find all kinds of activism in the dark web. And I want to specifically mention one today. This is Decoded Legal, which is one of the first legal company or law firms that basically went on the dark web and offered their services not only via the usual distribution channels of a legal team, but also offer their services via the dark web when it comes to legal consulting, right? You can find them usually on decoded.legal, and this is just one of the, let's say, activism sites in the legal space that is pretty well known in the dark web, for example. Okay, so I'm looking at the time, and we just have some time left for questions. And I thank you for your attention, and I'm ready for questions if there are any.
Walter, thank you very much for this very intensive and interactive presentation. We have some questions for you. I'm going to read the first one. These encrypted communication applications like Telegram charge the use of the dark web in the areas like free speech or discussion side.
Okay, so yes and no. There always have been some very good messaging services in the dark web available, like messaging clients and everything like that. But yeah, we've seen that a lot of criminals use Telegram, for example, or if you go deeper, there is an now sadly defunct messaging app called Vicker, which was basically very private. They only saved the username and nothing else, right? So yeah, they did change the landscape, but not so much in the dark web. I would say more in the clear web when it comes to secure communication outside of the dark net, I would say.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Mark has answered. The next question, is there something like a deep web within the dark web? That means that like there's also stuff you can find with your darknet able browser, some information you can only find it lodged in the input kind of services into dark web in the dark web.
Yes, basically, yes, sure. As I said, or as I mentioned before, there are, or roughly the dark web is basically divided into three parts. We have the public part, which is basically accessible by anyone. We have the semi-public, which you need to either register yourself or pay a fee to enter or be invited to, right? And then you have the private sector, which you are only invited to. You won't find these onion services via the search engines, via the directories or something like that. These onion sites are invite only. They are only known to a limited group of people, and they usually are used for illegal activities. Keep in mind, illegal does not mean the same for anyone. So there are a lot of activist groups which have onion services and sites that are not indexed on the sites I previously shown. So yeah, you can definitely say there is a deep web in the dark web, basically. Yes.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Walter. The next question I'm going to read for you. Do cybersecurity firms collaborate with the government law enforcement authorities to monitor research the dark web to protect their customers' business or society as a whole?
I'm sure they are, yes. I know in Germany there are some companies that do that. We as the DGC, we had a few run-ins with the law enforcement, and when a customer already had a security incident, right? But there was also a time, this was before I worked for DGC, where we found, for example, for the car rental Buchbinder, where we found a huge trove of data, which we also, in collaboration with the law enforcement, basically, made the people aware of that. So I would say, if I understand the question correctly, I would say yes, there are definitely cybersecurity firms that collaborate with the law enforcement.
Perfect. Thanks a lot. The next question. We have a lot of interesting questions today. When we order something anonymously, how do we keep our address anonymous as well? Obviously, the order must be sent to the same address, but this address may compromise anonymity.
I can't tell you how to do that, since that would be illegal. But I can redirect you to sites like, for example, Hunix, which talk a lot about anonymity and how to stay anonymous and everything like that. Give me a second. I can show you the website of Unix. Share screen. Here. And Whonix has a dedicated documentation to how to stay anonymous in the dark web, how to do everything the right way, how to be basically as anonymous as possible in the dark web. As I said, I can tell you how to do it, but you can research it for yourself.
Okay, good to know. Thanks a lot. The next question about the skills to the career. What skills do you think that we have to know? It's absolutely necessary for someone who is about to start working in cybersecurity sector. Where we have to start if we want to become another dark web expert like you?
Okay, so generally, when you want to start in the cybersecurity sector, you have to think outside of the box. So when I started in the cybersecurity firm, I often caught myself only thinking inside some imaginary walls and not thinking outside of the box, since it seems unconventional for me, right? During my journey in the cybersecurity space, I more and more realized that when you start in cybersecurity, one of the first things you have to learn is to think outside of the box and to always question, is the information I see valid? Is the one I talk to valid? And is the information where I got it from, is that source valid? And I think this is one of the key aspects when it comes to cybersecurity. When it comes to dark web, you have to be vigilant. You have to be willing to fool people to a certain extent. And you have to sell yourself very well in certain groups to have access to specific kind of informations. So I would say you have to know how to handle people and how to talk with people to make it in the dark web, since everything else would not work for a long time.
Okay, good. The next question for you, Wolf. To go on the darknet, you would recommend more Whonix or Tails?
I think you skipped the question.
I will come back to this later.
Okay. So I would recommend Whonix. Just from my personal experience, Whonix also offers the ability to run itself inside Qubes OS. As I said, you can learn more about Qubes and Whonix on their website, but from my experience, from what I've seen from the community around the project, I would say Whonix is far superior than Whonix is far better than Tails, in my mind.
Good. The other question is there any study on how many people is working or recruiting in darknet, and how many are working on both Cloudnet and Darknet? Thank you for your answer in advance.
No, there is no study. So one of the key parts of the dark web, of course, is to stay as anonymously as possible. So yes, there are cybersecurity firms that employ dark web or that employ people to search the dark web. There are dark web analysts that do from 8 to 6 basically only research the dark web. But no, there is no study and there is no rough estimate guess how many people are recruited in the dark web. But you can almost be sure that the big cybersecurity firms are all in the dark web, and you can always be sure that specific agencies with 3 letters always have a very close eye on the dark web, on everyone who walks there, who watches stuff, and they usually tend to be very good at identifying people if they want to identify people. Let's put it that way.
It should be only 3 letters or 4 letters. Agencies.
Yeah, usually they have 3 letters. Yeah, usually they have 3 letters.
Okay, good. I have another question for you, Walter.
Yes.
Recently, we see a lot of AI tools, AI empowered tools, etc., etc. Do you think that under these circumstances, the life of the dark web users will be difficult? They might find it quite easily by using the AI tools.
Yes, most likely. Since I have seen AIs which are capable as of today to mimic native speaker text chat. You could not basically you could not tell the difference between a native speaker and the AI chatbot. And one of the big things is, for example, when we go in the Russian sector, for example, of the dark web, you are usually very or they usually know very fast that you are a foreigner, since your Russian is completely bad, right? But there are AI programs that can generate texts like a Russian native. For other languages as well too. For example, for English, there are various AI programs. So I would recommend everyone to look, for example, at the AI program that comes with Microsoft Bing, for example. Or when you want to experiment for yourself, just look up Freedom GPT. Freedom GPT is basically ChatGPT, but you can host it yourself. So the data stays always on your system. It's offline and it's completely private. It has no connection to the internet whatsoever. And you basically can explore the power of AI for yourself. But yes, AI will be one of the major issues that we will encounter in the next 10 to 15 years, I would say. Not only when we talk about phishing, or when you talk about the dark web, or when we talk about trusting information, but also coding exploits like GitHub Copilot, for example. It's easier to code than ever. When we talk about sophisticated attacks that usually would require a lot of manpower, you can let it basically run by AI. And one of the major security fields that I see in the next 5 to 10 years rising is aviation security and IoT security. Since aviation security usually is not that well researched when we talk about security in planes, for example. And when we talk about IoT security, 90% of IoT devices, I would suggest, are either not secure or very poor secure. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, we have
a question. Good news. Yes, we have another question. Just came in. Is it possible to control the dark web then? Is there any way to stop?
No. As I would say no, since, as I said earlier, the Tor traffic is not really distinguishable from normal HTTP, HTTPS traffic. Of course, you can filter the onion sites, sure, but when we talk about the darknet as a whole, there are very liberate states which I don't say support the dark web, but they make sure the dark web is growing as it grows, these states. And I don't think there is a chance to drain the darknet, but control in kinds of going after services, that's definitely possible. We've seen it with a community called the Hive, for example. We've seen it with the Breach Forum or Raid Forum that I mentioned earlier. So control, when we talk about finding threat actors, finding the bad people, that's completely possible. We had, for example, one very big hacker group that got tracked down by the Danish law enforcement due to the analysis of the blockchain that they use to pay or to get their payments, right? So yeah, that is possible. And we have another question, but I think the Swiss Cyber Institute froze for me. So I hope the people still can hear me. I will answer them. Besides aviation and IoT, which other sectors do you think will grow exponentially in the next 15 to 10 years? Renewable energy, control of this renewable energy. When we talk about renewable energy, we talk about remote controlling. For example, the solar panels, or we talk about the air energy, basically, when we talk about the control of them. So basically, this will be another topic that we have to talk about in the next 5-10 years. Another thing that we have to talk about is the topic sustainability, and of course, solar flares. The issue of solar flares is that they can basically cripple our whole society and our whole infrastructure, and they will be more common when we have climate change. That's a topic not a lot of people will talk about, since it's very scientific and it's very not really actionable. But it could be one day that we have a solar eruption and our whole infrastructure is breaking down. That is a possibility that can exist, right? And the second question is, which website do you recommend to check if my company data have been leaked? Okay, so one of the first websites I can recommend you is Have I Been Pawned? This is a website where you can sign up your company's email address or domain and get notified of leaks. So this service is run by federal security researcher Troy Hunt, and he basically informs people when their email address got or is part of a leak, for example, right? Yes. Okay, so I see
I had
back.
Yeah,
Perfect.
I'm back. Sorry, I had a technical issue.
All
I don't know
good.
what happened. Hopefully no one hacked me.
Yes, I already answered both questions that are currently open.
Hashtag.
And I don't think we have any more questions. So if someone has a question after the presentation, feel free to contact me on LinkedIn.
Sure.
I will try.
We are going to share your presentation with our attendees. We will share also the recordings, and we can also share, if you want, if you don't mind, your LinkedIn account in case anyone has a question. And I would like to thank you, first of all, you, Walter, and our attendees who spent their last 50 minutes with us. Thanks a lot for your time, and stay safe. Have a nice evening from Zurich.
Okay, perfect.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.